Rise and shine. Pour yourself a cup of coffee and tune in to Good Morning Aurora. News, weather, and really cool interviews. Monday through Friday from 8 to 9 a.m.
Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. Good morning, Aurora. The time is now 8:01 a.m. You're listening to and watching Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. It's Friday, the 3rd of March. It's Women's History Month. It's also First Friday, too.
Yeah.
All of those. It's like a burrito of cool stuff, right?
Yeah,
like,
just really wrapped good, up. Like a real burrito.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
We hungry, so that's where that came from. But ladies and gentlemen, you're listening to Good Morning Aurora, the second largest city's first daily news podcast. We have a great guest with us today. We'll be talking about world relief with Rachel Wassink.
Good morning.
How you feeling?
I'm feeling great. Yeah.
When you woke up this morning, what was the mood? What was the theme? Does that happen to you? I wake up with a theme. Like,
yeah.
I feel.
Yeah, the theme of my day was, oh, I missed my alarm. So I've pivoted a bit, though. So now I'm just here, and the theme of my day is burritos.
Okay, all right.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, we're just going to wrap that and roll with it. We're just going to roll with it. Gabriel Bradford, how are you?
Feeling great. Excited for First Fridays. It's going to be a good night.
It is.
There's a lot of fun things going on.
Josue Pais, good morning. Norma Peterson, good morning. Gams fam, hope everyone has a safe and happy Friday. Same to you. And Breakfast Burrito, yes. See, it's already caught on.
Wow, yeah.
It's already caught on.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I hope somebody's actually going to eat one and honor all the listeners with the
Yes.
tastiness of it.
Yeah.
We'll be talking about World Relief. For those who are unfamiliar, tell us about World Relief Chicagoland, and this is the Aurora office that you represent.
Yeah, for sure. So World Relief is a global humanitarian organization, and our mission is to empower our local communities and churches to serve refugees and immigrants. So we work with people from all around the world that are have had to flee their homes. They've had to leave their homes because of crises there, and so we welcome them and help them adjust to life in America through holistic services that we'll get into more. So World Relief Chicagoland has 3 office locations, and we're in the city, we're in DuPage County, and then we're here in Aurora. So we've been right here in downtown Aurora since 1999.
Wow.
Yeah.
And you guys are on LaSalle Street.
We are. Yep, we're right there.
Also known as Auto Row.
Yeah. There's a big poster that you can see on LaSalle to read about that.
Right.
Yeah, it's a lot of history right
and
there.
all the downtowns, some of those downtown, the bottom ones have the history and the whole markers in there about what it used to be. It's interesting because the building that you guys are in, I like the feel of it.
Oh, yeah. It's got that kind of homey meets welcoming meets a little scrappy. So we like it as a nonprofit. We like that.
Yeah. I got an email once upon a time, office furniture donation from World Relief. So I furnished my basement with some of the stuff y'all was giving away. Nice oak furniture though.
Oh,
so, shout out.
So glad. So glad.
Yeah, I remember when I came there, I made a bunch of friends that day. Like, yes, he's here. Get it out of here.
Yeah.
So what does the refugee story, right?
Yeah.
For the people who are fleeing conflict and the different things that happen out there in the world when they come here to America, in a nutshell, because we're not talking to a refugee at the moment, but what's their story and what does the general public not understand about these people?
Yeah, that's a great question. So refugees have had to flee their home because of the persecution they're experiencing based on their race, their nationality, their political opinion, their religious membership, or participation in a social group. And so we like to describe that refugees and immigrants experience something that pushes them out of their country and then pulls them to a new country. So the pull factor is wanting to rebuild their lives, right? They're wanting to restart their lives. So refugees, when they live in a refugee camp, which the average refugee spends about 17 years in a refugee camp before they're resettled into another country. And in these last 2 years alone, over 1 million children were born into the refugee life, so born in refugee camps. And so many people will live the majority of their life in a refugee camp if they're experiencing that crisis in their home. And so something that we probably don't know about refugees is that refugees when they come to the United States, they've experienced obviously immense trauma and immense crises, and they've been picked up very suddenly from their home. They'll say that the average amount of time that it takes a refugee to pack up their home and flee their home is 3 minutes. So it's like going into your home. I don't think I could even find my passport in 3 minutes time. Right. I don't currently know where my wallet is right now. Like what privilege.
I lost mine like a week ago, right?
Yeah, it happens, right? So they've fled their home. They've lived life in a refugee camp, and refugee camps, they spark a lot of images in your mind. Some people might think tents. Some people might think sand and dirt. Some people might think a large building that's vacant and just has bedding everywhere. And they are everything in between that. There's, depending on the place, sometimes refugee camps are apartment style, and other times they are tent camps that are surrounded by barbed wire fence. And so when you're living in a refugee camp, you spend a lot of time just waiting. You spend a lot of time just sitting there waiting for what's next in your life. And then once you get resettled into the U.S., which is the hope for a lot of refugees, there's about 37 countries in the world that resettle refugees. They come here and they suddenly have to figure out a new way of doing life.
Everything.
From
the currency to the traffic laws.
Yes, language, technology, how jobs work. Mm-hmm. Many refugees come here with immense skills and careers that they left behind. I've had refugee friends who were doctors and surgeons in their home country, but then they come here and they can't practice because it's not the same credentials, and so they have to start a new career in order to provide for their family. And so they end up doing various manufacturing jobs and things like that as they seek to rebuild their lives here. So all that to say, if the answer to your long ago question of what do we maybe not know about refugees is that they bring with them so many assets and so many strengths. They bring such a beauty to our community right here. And Aurora has become this city filled with refugees and immigrants because of the work of organizations like World Relief that were able to welcome them here. And they bring a value to our community that I think makes us better and stronger in a way that we couldn't be if it was just local Americans.
Right. Now, the process when it comes to, so whatever the inception point looks like or whenever that was, to now being assisted by World Relief Chicagoland, one of your offices, what length of time, I'm sure for each individual that's probably very different.
Right.
But is there an average length of time that they've been in is system a good word for it?
Yeah. The services.
Okay, yeah.
So a refugee will find out that they are being placed in the United States, and then they're still living in the refugee camp at this point, and then they go through about 2 years worth of background checks and screenings. Sure. And once they go through all of those, people don't realize how incredibly vetted refugees are to be here.
I'm glad you brought that up. I don't want to stop your train of thought. I'll come back to that. Yeah, absolutely.
Great. And so they arrive here, but before they arrive, they know that they have been matched with World Relief Chicagoland. So there are other resettlement agencies here in the U.S., and but World Relief is just one of them. And so they know that World Relief is going to be helping them. And so we meet them at the airport. A volunteer or a staff person goes and picks up our refugees at the airport, and then we give them intensive services for about a year. So that's everything from helping them create a budget, helping them get on their feet economically so that they can provide for themselves. World Relief is very focused on creating lasting and sustainable change.
Right.
It would be easy to write a check for $10,000 and say, have at it.
Right.
But we want to create sustainability and a path forward for them. So all of our services really focus on that holistic, let's make sure that you can start to walk on your own feet here, because that's not just empowering, but it also gives them dignity. It also helps them say, I have a budget and I follow that budget, or I have a job and I provide for my family, or I saved up and bought a car. Now I drive that car. So for that first year, we're providing a lot of services throughout the year, every 30 days, check-ins and things like that. But then we continue to offer services for up to 5 years. So for a lot of people, that looks like they've got on their feet, they're doing really well, but they decide, I want to start a career,
right? Or
I want my child to go to college,
I'm ready to branch my roots now.
Yes, exactly. Yeah, great. The tree imagery is really, really good. And we always see that, like, if you think about it, refugees are bringing with them their roots from another country, and now they're trying to transplant it here, but their roots still have just this beautiful produces a beautiful branch that is not from here. And so it's figuring out how to integrate these two worlds of their sending country and their host country.
Right.
Yeah.
Now, the thing that you mentioned too, and there's also accountability that's built into that too, and everything that you talk about, because if they're staying followed up, or they're being followed up with, they're being assessed, and they're in constant contact with folks. But you brought up the vetting process.
Yeah.
Yes. The vetting process, and this is something that I don't think that our, especially in media in certain places, has been fair with. The vetting process for a refugee is extremely robust. I mean, it's complete.
Right.
I mean, we're working with Homeland Security.
Right.
Who will leave no stone unturned.
No.
If you got a traffic ticket in Brussels, they will find it.
Yeah, for sure.
And I've always thought that that's been very unfair to demonize these people, because I think also a lot of people don't know the difference between a refugee and a migrant.
For sure, yeah.
Can you talk about that a little bit?
Let's unpack that a bit. So to start, kind of like an umbrella there, is that these are all very politically charged terms that we're using. Refugee, immigrant, migrant, asylee, all these things. They're terms that we see in the news, and depending on what news you're following, they come with their own baggage. But something that I always like to remind people is that terminology is terribly unhelpful in giving human dignity, right?
True.
You can't boil me down to one term.
True.
I'm a whole person. And so I always encourage folks to remember, as you hear those terms, suspend the feelings or the judgments that you may have about those terms, and instead remember that these are people. These are humans with stories. These are humans who have mothers and fathers. They're humans that want to make a home somewhere. So that's the kind of baseline. But then going from there, there's lots of different ways of coming to the U.S. when you're outside of the U.S. So for refugees, before they even enter the United States, they've been granted that refugee status by the UN. So there's an entity within the UN called the United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees, and they are the only entity in the entire world that can grant a refugee status. So if you, for example, if we today, right here in Aurora, we're about to experience persecution because of our citizenship here in Aurora, we couldn't just say, I'm a refugee now, I need to flee my home. That's a status that has to be applied for and then granted. So refugees living in a refugee camp all have that status. So before they even come to the U.S., they have started that process. And then once they get matched with being resettled in the U.S. or any other country, they go through that system that country has for resettlement. So the U.S. has for sure the highest standards of background checks and processes that refugees have to go through. So they go through medical screenings, they go through several different kinds of background checks. So we're not talking just like the little link we fill out before we get a new job.
Oracle, nah.
Yeah. It's like, it's
FBI.
Very intensive. They're going through interviews where they're sitting down and speaking with someone who doesn't speak their language, and to learn about this person and their story. And so that all happens before they even come to the U.S. And so that's a refugee story. But we're going to jump over to a really broad term, which is just immigrant. And immigrant is a very big umbrella term, and it means anyone who's born outside of the U.S. and comes to stay for a prolonged period of time. So if you are coming to the U.S. on a student visa, that's not actually considered an immigrant because it's temporary, right? You know, and so, but if your intention is to have permanent residence here in the U.S. And you were born outside the U.S., you're considered an immigrant.
Right.
So then there's lots of different ways that immigrants can come here. And we call it alphabet visa soup. You know, there's lots of visas that you can come here through. So for example, it's International Women's Month, and women who experience trafficking or sex trafficking or are enslaved and things like that, or are abused in their countries, there is a visa that allows for them to escape that and get to the U.S., right? And so there's lots of different options there. Where we most often hear people talking about immigrants and asylum seekers or asylees, which is another term. It's just another term for people that have had to flee their home, but they don't yet have status to be here, or they don't yet have a permanent status to be here. We most often hear that being talked about in Latin America. And that's where a lot of the politically charged feelings and things like that come up. And the reason that you hear about that most often with immigration is because in Latin America, there are very few options for people to become refugees. The UNHCR, who I mentioned, grants that refugee status. They don't have offices in Latin America. And so to become a refugee, you have to get to a UNHCR office. And so there's a lot of government instability in Latin America. And so the UNHCR doesn't have a lot of established partnerships there. And so people experiencing very similar push factors in their home countries in Latin America, like refugees around the world, they don't have as many options to get to safety, to get to the U.S. So they seek out another option. They look for another pathway because they realize if I stay here in my home, I'm going to die.
Which is what takes them from like Uruguay, if you know anything about geography, all the way up to finally get to that is a perilous journey.
So people that traverse up in South America, into Central America, and into Mexico, they'll often spend upwards of $10,000 to pay basically like a guide who gets them there. But at each border, there's various things happening, like they'll be asked for more money, or they'll be beaten, or they'll be lots of crime, lots of it's not just a stereotype, lots of drug smuggling that people take advantage of immigrants of. And so they'll often be very hurt. Many people do die on that journey. They say the most dangerous part about a refugee or immigrant story is that traveling part, where they're trying to get to their first harbor of safety. And so that is actually an entire industry of trafficking known as the transit trafficking industry. It's where people are charging unjust, huge fees just to try to provide them with safe passageway. And oftentimes it's not even safe. And then what happens for those Latin Americans is they'll get to the border of Mexico and the United States, and they're faced with the decision. Do I go to a port of entry and say, I want to declare asylum in the United States because my home country was not safe, at which point they're detained for usually 18 to 2 plus years, 18 months to 2 plus years, or do I just try to get into the United States without status? So we never judge those two different decisions that people have to make, because that is a crisis, traumatic moment. They are at the border having to decide, what do I do? So World Relief works with people regardless of their status and regardless of how they got here, and we try to help them find a pathway forward that includes legal services. So helping them acquire that legal permanent residence card, which is what we colloquially call a green card.
Right.
So
interesting, and it's because the color was typically green.
It's not green anymore. So
people, that's another thing. People didn't even know that. Why does it why is it called a green card? Well, read. But I've been fortunate enough to travel in different places, and I've always told folks, like, if you haven't traveled outside of the United States of America, I mean, there are places where there is abject, tragic poverty.
Right.
And, I feel that not working in the industry, I do feel that America should not make these people's life or journey any harder than it already has been. Not without slicing through the onion layers of the political aspects.
For sure.
I'm not
Right.
the person granting anybody's status, but I do believe, right, do no harm.
Right. Yeah. Don't add more trauma to the story that already is filled with trauma.
Absolutely.
Right? Yeah.
So real quick, we are going to take a small break. Remember, I had that news I was going to tell you about delivering. Real quick. So,
Yes.
ladies and gentlemen, it is First Friday. And it's Women's History Month. I got a couple of cool places to tell you guys about to go to tonight. Good morning to Jose Milagro Torres. Good morning. God bless. Good morning, Aurora. Appreciate that. Aisha Sachs and Tracy Duran. Zora Zapata. Good morning and happy Friday to you as well. Zora Zapata is a dear friend of ours. She is the namesake and founder of Zora Zapata Handcrafted. She does like face painting and she makes all kinds of other great items. Look her up on Instagram and Facebook. And actually, before I give you the news, hold on, let me scratch it up for me. Wednesday, Michael Rayford was here and he asked me did I read his book? I told him no. But that's because I was
honesty.
Because and Gabriel was like, yo, you didn't read it? And I was like, what if I told him that I had and I hadn't? That was ethics right there. That's because I was 3 books out that I need to read before I get to here. Is the last book, ladies and gentlemen, that I want to give to you guys that day, but I just remembered is this book here. Let me show you guys on camera. I will give you that women's history news here momentarily, but it's this book right here. It is called The Well-Tempered Sentence, a punctuation handbook for the innocent, the eager, and the doomed. It's by Karen Elizabeth Gordon. This book here is magnificent. It's all about how to use punctuation good to your benefit and be creative and use it with zeal.
Ooh, good word.
Zeal.
Yeah.
So you can write like, yes, boss, I'll be there tomorrow. Okay, check this out, guys. This First Friday's theme is Women in the Front, which spotlights women who stand up, take charge, and inspire. According to our friend Marissa Amoni, quote, "It is such an honor to be able to theme an evening around women in our community. There are a countless number of amazing women that have helped shape our city," close quote. She said that about a dozen venues will participate in the Women in Front theme for First Fridays, which will include special exhibits and feature many women-owned businesses. Number 1 is Zen Loft Wellness Center, 6 West Downer Place. Emily, what up? Good morning to you. They'll be open with women, an art exhibit from 5 to 9 p.m. The Aurora Historical Society will host an exhibit honoring artist and educator Ruth Van Sickle Ford from 6 to 9 p.m. GAR has Hidden Warriors, the history of women in the U.S. military. Now, that's going to be a good one. That's going to be a good one. You'll see some good firsts in there. About our military. GAR is right around the corner from us, 23 East Downer Place. Art Bar at Two Brothers will host a Simpson show featuring Alexis Patino. There's a whole lot, too many to read to you guys, but I'll tell you about Artisan Lofts. They have the Black Light featuring Johnny Felix paintings, in addition to a Black Light palette makeup performance by Gina Jen from Game Makeup Supply from 6 to 9 p.m. The time is 8:23. So, you guys have a number of services. One of them is the DACA citizenship course. What was it again?
Clinic.
Yeah. The DACA citizenship. Tell folks about that.
Yeah, for sure. So, many people, so a huge pillar of our work is our immigration legal services. It's for sure one of our biggest department. In the last year, almost 3,000 people received some kind of immigrant legal service provision. So, but those who are here through DACA or those who are in the process of becoming citizens often need a little bit of support in those next steps. And so, for example, when someone gets that legal permanent residence card, after 5 years, they can actually apply to become a citizen.
Awesome.
And so we host citizenship courses and clinics where they are coming and they're preparing for that exam, a citizenship exam. I did a game show as a marketing thing for World Relief, and I failed the test.
You did?
Yeah, I've lived here my whole life. I went to school. I took history class.
That honesty, though. It's all good. It's all right.
Yeah, thank you. So, but it's a very hard exam, and there's also a speaking component, and there's a language component. And so these are people who have worked so hard. And what I want to highlight is that they've worked so hard while also often raising a family of children,
right,
and making sure those children are set up for success, and also working a full-time job. So it's like imagining like being in grad school at the same time as having babies at the same time as working.
Right.
And so they've worked very hard for this. And so we want to support them along the way. And they're people that have really established some good roots and gotten on their feet really well. And so in a lot of ways, they don't need World Relief for much, but this is kind of like that next step. And this is just such an exciting thing when you work at World Relief, because you see someone who came here and didn't know the language and didn't know how to get to the grocery store, and they didn't know like basic things about life in America. Why should they? And then they are suddenly standing before a government official and told, you are a citizen of the United States.
Right.
You can vote in our next election. You are not going to ever be forced to leave here. And so we help them along the way preparing for that. And one of the ways we do that is through just a huge program of volunteers. So we are a staff of somewhere in between 100 and 200. We've been in the midst of growing, and I just can't tell you that exact number right now, because there's lots of new faces pretty much every week, which is really exciting for us. But in the last year, more than 1,000 volunteers served with us, and over 400 of them were first-time volunteers. So they've never volunteered with us, and they're volunteering with us now. So with citizenship, our volunteers will kind of act as a tutor. And so they're sitting down with the curriculum for becoming a citizen, and they're helping them study and prepare. And so I love these volunteers, because some of them will come with, like me, not all of the knowledge,
right,
but they learn together.
Right.
And I think that is what's so important. We talk about, we always want to see mutual transformation, where when you're engaging with a refugee or immigrant, it's not just that refugee or immigrant who's being transformed, but you're being transformed.
Absolutely.
I am better because I'm friends with refugees.
Absolutely.
I learn how to live life. I learn how to celebrate holidays. I learn how to engage with my neighbors because of refugees. So, which that comes with lots of funny and complicated stories too, because
it does.
Humanity is a thing, right? You know, so. I'll never forget, like anecdotally, I walked into a home once and I was wearing flip-flops, and because it was the summer and I wasn't even supposed to be working, and I walk into a refugee home and the father of the home just starts laughing at me, and I am, I feel very awkward, like, why is this man laughing at me? What's happening? And there was a language barrier, and so finally we figured it out through one of the teenagers. He had never seen flip-flops outside the context of the shower, because
right,
they were just shower shoes in his country. And so he didn't know. He's like, why are you wearing flip-flops? So it comes with lots of funny stories, and it comes with also lots of stories where I have assumptions that I need to check at the door.
Right.
I'll think, this is how you live life, because I've been living here in Aurora and
right,
like doing life here, and to learn that life is done differently is a huge eye-opening experience, and you bring a lot of your own context and assumptions about how life should be lived. We all bring that. And so anyway, so that mutual transformation piece is something that's at the forefront of all of our volunteer opportunities. And so that's what I love about volunteering with World Relief, because you don't just give, but you also receive a ton, and you as a person become better and you grow. But another one of our volunteer opportunities is working with our DACA clinics. So so
okay,
DACA, you brought that up, is a program for people here in the U.S., and it comes with a lot of paperwork, and it comes with a lot of confusion.
Right.
And so we're hosting these clinics, basically like legal clinics where people can come and receive legal services at kind of like it's almost like, I sometimes call it like speed dating. It's very fast,
Right.
but but not inconsiderately fast. But our volunteers help to run that and copy paperwork and things like that. And the paperwork with any of these immigrant legal service elements is just so intense. It's very intensive. I recently went to a new doctor's office, and I had to fill out like 12 pages of paperwork. And I was like, I don't know all the answers to these questions. And I am fully English speaking. I've lived here all my life. Like the paperwork for immigration is triple that. It's so intense. And so we're having volunteers and staff people, staff attorneys and accredited officials sit down with people to provide them with just and affordable legal services.
Right.
So it's a huge, huge area for us of being able to serve a population that is often taken advantage of, because there's a lot of legal service provisions out there that are actually charging huge fees, and we don't
those predatory places.
Yeah, exactly. And so they'll just, say, give me $10,000, go through this process, but then they never actually get that legal permanent residence card, or they're taken advantage of. And so we're providing very just and affordable services, and the fees that we charge are basically just the fees to send in the paperwork.
Right. Which is what a lot of people don't know.
Yeah.
A lot of people don't know that.
Yeah.
And that's where they get to, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like it would cost the organization,
right,
the credentialed organization. It's just a matter of,
right.
but you,
Yeah.
person A from Guatemala,
Yeah.
that's so sad.
Yeah.
And that's where the whole thing with just, we can't do no harm. It's already bad enough. The system is already, which leads me to the question I did have. What could be done at the federal government level that could make things easier or better? Not necessarily the magic wand question, but what can be done, or what legislation is out there that needs to be passed, that needs to finally be accepted or approved, that could make things better for the folks that we're talking about and for the organization.
Yeah, for sure. So there's lots of options. Advocacy is a huge takeaway, that if you're wanting to get involved in some way, anyone who is a registered voter can call their local or federal officials. So you can go to a website, if you just type in who is my local and federal official, you'll figure it out eventually. And so going there, and you can call them at any time. I've learned this. They have staffers and delightful little interns around the clock.
Absolutely.
And they answer and they say, what's your name? What is your zip code? And then you can share with them pretty much anything you want. And so I've started just doing this if I'm in traffic driving from work, I'll just hook up to my Bluetooth speaker in my car and call my local official and remind them that I would like to pass a message on to my officials that I want to advocate for just measures for refugees, or I want to see more refugees welcomed into the United States. Every single country that resettles refugees, they set a ceiling of the maximum number of refugees that can come to the U.S. And so in our previous presidential administration, that ceiling was lowered to the most historic low it had ever been in the history of refugee resettlement.
And they were proud of it.
They were very proud of it. Yeah.
Deplorable.
It was really heartbreaking, but World Relief persisted, and we didn't stop doing the work, and we didn't stop doing the work of welcoming people who are here and who are coming. And so, but then it was when this current administration came in, they set the ceiling to a much higher number of 125,000, and but unfortunately, the infrastructure for welcoming those amount of people has really been depleted. During that previous administration, there was just not enough funding going into refugee resettlement. And so, like I mentioned earlier, those background checks take 2 years. So if we don't have people in the pipeline, if we don't have them starting to cycle through, they're not going to start the background check. Right. So even though the ceiling was set at 125,000, we didn't even come close to hitting that in this past year. And so calling and reminding your official, I want to continue to see our ceiling to be increased, or for us to get closer to reaching that ceiling. That is one huge way. And that kind of people sometimes can feel a little bit like, if I'm just calling and leaving a message, is that even significant? Is that doing anything? But it does matter. My officials eventually do reach back out to me and say, thank you. I took this with me to Congress, or I took this. And so there's lots of people on the Hill that are advocating for more and more legislation. One piece of legislation that I'll highlight is that if you guys remember back last fall in 2021, I don't know, the years all start to blur. 2022, I don't remember.
2020,
yeah, probably.
I had to think about it myself too, like, damn.
No. Okay, yeah. So
yeah.
Ever since 2020, it's just all irrelevant to me.
It's all running together.
Yeah,
it's all running together.
But actually, no, it was fall of 2021. The Kabul, Afghanistan fell, and Afghans fled here in heaps and bounds.
Right.
So many Afghans came through a parolee assistance program, which basically means you experienced an acute crisis that required an immediate evacuation. You came here. Afghans, before they were resettled into communities, they were living in the equivalent of a refugee camp or a detention center. They were living in camps around the U.S. so that they could be processed. And we were dealing with so many things here. People are fleeing with no documentation because they were fleeing to the airport. It was a crisis. If you remember the photos and images of Kabul, it was devastating. And so they're riding, cargo planes to get here. They get here, and then they're put into these camps so that they can be processed and also go through some minimum amounts of background checks and security checks, as well as medical screenings. COVID was still really prominent at the time, so we were dealing with so many things. And so but they came here and they are living here through this, their documentation is through this parolee assistance program. Right. And so right now, a huge legislation piece is to advocate for a way for them to have permanent residence here. Right. So they don't currently have that. So there is on the legislation table, there is a program for them that would allow them to get that green card to then move forward with life in America. And the same is true for Ukrainians. So Ukrainians have, for the same reason, had to flee their home because of war and violence. And so they too are here on a temporary program. And so advocating to your officials for pathways for Afghans and Ukrainians to have permanent residence here is a huge piece of legislature that we want to see happen.
That's great. The time is 8:36 a.m. Jose Milagro says, yes, amen, unity. Alejandro, good morning. Joe Jackson, good morning. Monica, good morning. Norma Peterson, good morning. Jennifer Ryan Mayton, good morning to you. What can I do?
Yeah.
What can the normal citizen do? What can just anybody who's listening, right?
Right. Yeah.
And they think like we do, and they would like to help out. How can the normal person get involved, and what can the normal person do just to help out?
Yeah, great question. So World Relief is filled with normal people, so that's perfect. Yeah, we've got a bunch of regular humans.
I don't want to join the crazies of Good Morning Aurora. How can I roll with you?
Yeah, there's lots of options. Some of those options include, so like I talked about meeting a refugee at the airport, and then we take them to their home. That's because we take them to an apartment or a home that they're going to be renting that is fully furnished and ready to go. And we're able to do that because of the donations of so many people. Right. So if you go to our website and toggle down to get involved, you'll see that you can donate items. So we are, you took some furniture from us, but we're often taking furniture from other people.
True.
There's always things that we need, and the refugee resettlement program requires us to have certain furnishings and certain things in a home. So we have to meet those requirements as part of our funding. And so we're furnishing that home to create this really welcoming home. And I'll tag on then another option is our volunteering. So we don't just ourselves haul those couches in. We have a team of volunteers to come do that. So apartment setup volunteers are my very favorite volunteer opportunities which I probably shouldn't pick a favorite since I work at World Relief, but they are my favorite, so I'll just say it. There's no point in lying, but they come into this empty apartment. It's bare bones. It's not super pretty because we're talking about an apartment here, and it goes from just being this barren room to becoming a welcoming home in
Right.
like 30 minutes. So it's
Right.
like HGTV, but
Started
nonprofit.
from the bottom, now we're here.
Yes,
Right.
yes, yeah. I always sing that actually when I'm setting them up. But it's super fun, and so you like roll up to a local Aurora apartment. You're there for 30 minutes. You haul in some furniture, but you fill the drawers. You put food in the cupboards. You do all those things, and so it's super fun, and it's an easy way to prepare that space. So it's one of our opportunities where you're not engaging as much with refugees or immigrants. You're not meeting them, but you're instead just preparing the way for them, which I think is a really valuable opportunity. So volunteering is another huge way. We are always recruiting more volunteers because we have so many different opportunities. We have ones like that where we're doing something a little bit more task-based, and then you have ones where you're engaging relationally with our refugee and immigrant neighbors. So you're getting to know them. We have an opportunity that's simply called Friendship Partner, and that just means you're matched with a family, and the goal is to provide friendship,
Right.
to walk through life with them for 6 months to a year, and to get to know them, to sit down and have tea with them. I always tell friendship partners, you're going to gain probably 10 to 15 pounds because they're going to feed you like crazy.
Right.
I've walked into a home before, an entire goat was on the table prepared for me, ready to eat. And I was like, that's a lot of meat. I can't do that, So
No, that's a great aspect of it.
yeah,
though,
it's
too.
such a hospitable world when you start engaging abroad, and so volunteering, that's huge. But then another big one is through giving financially. So we have our 50-50 public-private funded organization. So we depend on the generosity of others. And I've seen just such beautiful stories where families have said, we're not going to go out to eat for a month, and we're going to put that money that we would have spent on going out to eat, and we're going to give it to World Relief so that a
Absolutely.
family can have groceries for a month or something like that. Those kinds of things. I've seen a lot of creative generosity and just a lot of joy that brings families. So giving is a huge area. And if you're like new to the World Relief world, obviously our website, it shares a lot of details. You can find a lot of information there, a lot of statistics. But we have a really fun event coming up in April, our Global Gala. And that is an event where we'll highlight stories of the work. We'll come together and have a meal. We'll hang out. There's going to be fun. There's going to be dancing. There's going to be a lot of joy. And so thank you. We're really excited about that event. And even if you're not a longtime partner or a longtime friend of World Relief, we're welcoming anyone to that event. So
Yeah. Well, before the camera came on and the mic came on, I told you my story of how I, met World Relief and you guys, which took me to my current path to the Neighbor Project and everything. But you guys do a whole lot of good, and it's the people can get involved with the refugees and that way. We have the one of the home maintenance courses where we teach folks who have a refugee background what the smoke detector is and does.
Yeah.
Something we take for granted here.
Like how to lock a door with a key.
Absolutely. Right?
That's
it's stuff like you don't even, it's
all those
amazing. Anecdotally, one family had fish drying on their balcony, right? Yeah. It's like, it's not really, it's not really something to see every day in Geneva, Illinois, but you know.
Yeah. You're always on your toes. You're always seeing new things.
Yeah. All right, real quick. It's 8:42 a.m. Gabriel Bradford, would you do us a favor? Would you please take us to a commercial, young man, and give us 3 pieces of news, and could you make one of those pieces the senior paint class, Oak Street Health?
Yes, they have a lot of things going on, including senior painting, which will be taking place on 2 days, Monday, March 13th, and the 27th from 1 to 2 p.m. This will take place at Oak Street Health, located at 1022 North Farnsworth Avenue in Aurora. This will be a fun and creative experience for seniors and will also feature light refreshments. You can call 630-358-9232. Again, the number to call is 630-358-9232. And Saturday, March 11th from noon to 3 p.m. will be the Chili Cook-Off happening at Java Plus, 1677 Montgomery Road. Competitors must complete an application plus a $20 fee for entry. For customers, there is a $5 fee, and that includes sampling and all the tasty submissions. All applications must be completed and submitted by March 1st. And for more information or to receive an application, you can call 331-212-6665.
All right, Gabriel Bradford doing this. Was there one more?
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Are you all good, man? Gabriel Bradford doing. I'm proud of him.
Yeah.
You hear how he delivered that?
Yeah, no, that's great. I want to go to the senior painting class. Can
Right.
I? How
Yeah.
old do you have to be?
I think you have to be a senior.
Oh, okay.
So you got a
Good
couple
job,
years.
young
Yeah.
man.
Yeah.
You
Wow,
good
wow.
job, young man.
That was-
You right? He walked right past that mine.
He did. Good job. You're you're doing great.
Keep going, man. I'm sorry.
Yeah. So March's first Friday, which is today, will be an awesome evening for comic book fans. Tango Comics is having a release party and comic book exhibition at Bolly Doyle Irish Pub, located at 20 West New York Street in downtown Aurora. This will be from 6 to 10 p.m. and will feature live music and a whole lot of cool people. This is sponsored by our friends of the show, Viso Arts, and friend of the show, Joshua Schultz, who will be one of the featured artists. And get ready for the show. We will also be in the house. We have Brett Putten, who will be down there and taking pictures. So if you see Brett, make sure to say hi. Shout outs to him.
Absolutely. Brett Putten is our mentee of the Triumph Mentoring Program at Wabanzi Community College. That's how we met
Amazing.
this young man. He's now part of the show fully. And Brett will be here Monday, Wednesday, Fridays in 2 weeks. So but Brett's going out tonight, get some pics. He's going to go over there, check it out.
Fun.
And Brett is community engagement. So,
Love it.
you know, he's
That's
in
great.
there. He's doing his thing. So good job, Brett, and we'll see you out there tonight, buddy. So the time is 8:45 a.m., and we're here with our dear friend Rachel Wassink of World Relief. This is a good conversation.
Yeah, I'm having
It's
a
a
lot
good
of fun.
conversation.
Yeah.
So another point that I want to talk about, too, here is the World Relief Chicagoland is DuPage, Aurora, and Chicago.
Yeah. So one office, 3 locations.
Right. Right now, there's been a big focus on, well, not a big focus, but, you know, Ukraine and everything that's going on there is the current tragedy.
Yeah.
There's also the conflict in Yemen.
Yeah.
Turkey and Syria experienced 2 earthquakes.
Yeah.
And I think it was like last year, there was a flood in, I believe, or typhoon in Bangladesh. With the amount of things that go on,
Yeah.
it seems as if there's always going to, unfortunately, be something that's going to be tragic in folks' lives, because people will get up and move for many different things. But what's your opinion of kind of splitting the hairs with some of these things? How does that feel? Does that impact the work you do? I know that you do your work in a very professional manner. You guys are awesome people, but I'm just asking about the internal toll, if you wouldn't
for
mind
sure.
sharing that.
Yeah, definitely. So, we have no shortage of crises happening in the world, right? It's a lot. And so, a really cool part about working at World Relief Chicagoland is that we're a part of a family of World Relief. So we have offices all across the U.S., not just here in Chicagoland, but then we also have offices abroad. So when something happens, like an earthquake in Turkey and Syria, we have people abroad that care about that really
Right.
specifically happening, right? And so World Relief Chicagoland is specifically doing like the work that we're doing, right? We're in the lanes that we are driving, and we do really good and deep work there. But there are things happening around the world, and I'll say crises like Ukraine or Afghanistan, when it does impact just our local context. It is, I remember, when Afghanistan happened, when the fall of Kabul happened and Afghans were pouring in, it was just this like really chaotic kind of like frontline moment where you're like, the adrenaline is pumping. And I got a call once, and someone said, hey, I have some donations that I want to drop off at your office. Can you bring a crew to unload those donations? And it's like, yeah, for sure. Like, we're about to have a flood of Afghans come. We need those donations. And I go to the back where our warehouse is, and there's 4 small U-Haul trucks filled to the brim. Like, we're talking like hoarders level packing. And it's 4 4 U-Hauls filled with stuff. And I'm like, this is more than just a crew unloading this. This is a lot of stuff, right? And so you're just on the ground moving that whole time when those crises are happening in triage mode. And then, I remember that day that we finally finished unloading all those things. I had not been expected. I was wearing my business cash outfits and
flip-flops.
I was not wearing, I learned my lesson. I've thrown away all my flip-flops. So, but they, I'm like hauling these boxes full of hygiene items, full of basic pantry items, all these things. And some laundry detergent had spilt down my dress. And so it was a little sticky, a little soapy, but whatever, and there was one last box. And I kid you not, it was the last box. And I grab it and it turned out to be this box full of baking flour. And one of the bags broke. And I had that sticky laundry dress situation. And then the flour just whoosh, stuck to me. And I just looked down and I was like, oh, I'm really tired.
Right.
The work can be very tiring, and we have lots of different positions. One where you're engaging directly with clients, where you're working with them and you're being exposed to their traumas. We have an entire team of mental health professionals who are providing counseling services to our clients to help them process their trauma. And so we talk a lot about what is secondary trauma, where you're exposed to someone else's trauma, but it's not your own, and how to do that, what to do with that. And so World Relief does a great job of giving us trainings about what do you do with this? How do you have good boundaries in the workplace? And there are seasons where that is a little bit harder, when you have 4 U-Hauls of items and you just have to unload it and you have to do it. So, I think one of the things that we make space for is that we make space for talking about some of the things that we're facing as a staff. We have regular gatherings of our staff where it's you can sit down and be like, this happened with this person, this happened with this client, and you can kind of just understand each other. Yeah. And I think that's where the people that are working at World Relief, they're not just doing that because it's a job that pays their bills. They're doing it because they want to be there.
Right.
And we want to do this work, and we get this just frontline exposure to these beautiful people. I get to just hold really beautiful stories all the time. And so, I think the toll sometimes does weigh on us a bit, for sure. We're tired at times, but the work is always so meaningful, and so it keeps us grounded. And we're a faith-based organization, and we serve out of that faith motivation because we believe that God's heart for welcoming the refugees are very clear throughout the Word of God. So and I will say we're that faith-based organization, but we work with people from all different practices and religions, and things
absolutely.
We welcome them no matter what. And so that keeps us pretty grounded, but. Yeah, it's a good question that not most people think to ask. So.
I don't. I applaud you guys what you do, because I do know, kind of like we talked about with the cultural experience. What one has been raised with here and everything. It takes a lot to. The average person can't do that.
No. Yeah.
People might be able to sit in an office and process files, right? But
for sure.
But unloading the box in the home of a Somali refugee,
right? Yeah.
It's not something that happens every single day to most people in America. And you got to be built for that.
Yeah.
And that's what I think when it comes to the work that's being done, that's what makes me happy about it. And that's what I like about what I do, And,
with the neighbors.
Yep, exactly.
And I think a lot of us at World Relief learn how to do the work from our refugee and immigrant neighbors. I've seen just so many gritty, powerful, strong people. There's one woman I want to highlight, and she says I can share her name, but her name is Gorith, and she came here in 2015. She lives right here in Aurora, and she's awesome, and she's very headstrong and very savvy, and she came from a refugee camp, and she had to leave behind her husband because her husband was someone that her first husband had died in the refugee experience and fleeing their home, and she had remarried in her time in the refugee camp, but her husband was on a different case than her. Right. So she had to leave him behind, and so she came here with her 2 daughters. Talk about International Women's Month. This woman is the picture of International Women's Month for me. She came here with her 2 daughters, and she got to work. She was missing her husband, missing her home country, missing her familiarity, and she got a job. She started going to English English classes. She made sure her daughters were enrolled in school. She said, like, we're not going to just like passively wait for my husband to come. Like, we're going to work really hard. She got into a savings program where she could save up to buy a car and save up to buy a home. She's done the work, and she has just, as she's done the work, she's never lost hope. And I think that's where like we've learned from people like Gorith to never lose hope. And then fast forward to 2022. And 7 years after she arrives, her daughters are now in college, studying at university, establishing their own lives here. And Gorith has spent the last 7 years advocating for her husband to come, trying to go through the process of reunification, which is a legal service that we help our clients with. And 7 years later, he arrived here in the U.S.
That's
and
awesome.
He's now joined her and gets to like see his wife settled and integrated into life here. And so I think we learn from stories like that, where it's like that persistence and hope is unwavering. And so if they can have that amidst their immense trauma and experiences, what if we had that too? And
Absolutely.
yeah.
The time is 8:55 a.m. How can folks get in contact with World Relief? What is the numbers, and get in contact with you for more information?
For sure. So we are on World Relief Chicagoland is on all the socials. So follow us there. You'll see lots of information about upcoming events, upcoming things like our global gala, which I already highlighted. And then our website is a great way to take any next step. So if you go to worldrelief.org/Chicagoland, you'll see how to get involved, whether it's volunteering, giving, donating items. All the details are really clear on there. And then my role at World Relief is one of actually just connecting with partners. I get to have a lot of coffee meetings, and anyone listening, I would have coffee with to talk about World Relief, because that's part of
like
the
my
job.
job.
Yeah,
Yep.
I love my job. So if you go through our website, you'll eventually get to my name and find me there. So yeah.
That's awesome. Well, the time is 8:55. This was a great conversation.
Yeah.
We will continue to share you guys' this stuff. We always share World Relief news all the time, anything
We're
you
so
guys are doing.
thankful. Yeah.
The weather's going to be getting good really soon. So Neighbor Project, I'm going to make some social media posts for us, but we got a call to volunteers to get some of our stuff done.
Yeah.
Are you guys going to be ramping up volunteer work?
For sure. We have a
soon?
lot of summer programming, especially for our kids, which is super fun. So if you get a summer break, whether you're a student yourself or a teacher or anything like that, we have a lot of fun summer programming for kids to keep them entertained and growing and learning in the summer. But then, like as we see more and more people coming to the U.S.,
Right.
and we expect just that number to increase in the years ahead. And we're really hopeful about that. We need more and more volunteers. So yeah, we are definitely ramping up.
All right. Well, this was a fantastic episode today. I feel like I learned a lot. I knew about the organization, as I mentioned, work right around the corner from you guys, but I do feel like I got a better understanding of what you guys do. I'm also glad that people got to hear the distinction between what we're talking about, an immigrant and a refugee. What's going on, the vetting process and all that kind of stuff. I'd like to raise the level of discussion when it comes to talking about immigrants in our country.
Yeah.
And I'd like to tamper down as much of the nonsense that doesn't help the overall goal as possible.
Yeah.
I think this interview today did that.
I'm so glad. And that's like my number one encouragement is like keep learning. I gave you like a tip of an iceberg here. Like there's so many great pieces of literature and movies and documentaries out there about refugees. And so if you heard me say something, or you're like, oh, I want to know more about DACA, or I want to know more about this, there's a ton of resources out there. And one of my favorite ways to do that is by reading memoirs. So many refugees and immigrants have written memoirs, and reading those books and reading their stories is kind of the number one way that I've learned a lot about them.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
That's awesome. I'm glad to have you on the show today.
Yeah,
This was a
thank
good
you
one.
so much.
This was a good one.
Oh, good.
Ladies and gentlemen, have a fantastic weekend. Good Morning Aurora will return next week on Monday morning. We've got some good stuff coming up for you guys. Brett Putten is going to be out there in the conversation tonight and around town. If you see him at Ballydoyle for the Tango Comics book release, say hi to him. He'll have on a Good Morning Aurora shirt. He's unmistakable. Ladies and gentlemen, be blessed. Take care of yourself and each other.
Bye.